The third time I caught Carla cheating, she didn't even bother to hide it. She turned her head on the hotel pillow, looked me dead in the eyes, and said, "You weren't supposed to be here this early." That was it. No panic, no guilt, just mild annoyance, like I'd interrupted a boring meeting. I didn't say a word. I didn't look at the man tangled beside her. I only looked at her. She sat up slowly, like she had all the time in the world. "Robert, I can explain." "You can't," I replied calmly, reaching for the ring on my finger, "but you'll try anyway." Carla laughed bitterly, pulling the covers around her bare body. "Oh, so you're doing this again? Walking out like last time?" "I'm not walking out this time," I said. "This time, I'm closing the door." I dropped the ring on the nightstand, right beside the half-finished wine she'd poured for him. Then I left. For years, I was the man who stayed, the man who forgave, the man who swallowed his pride because he didn't want to lose the woman he once believed in. I thought love meant endurance. I thought marriage meant repair, no matter how broken. But that night in the hotel room changed everything. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I called my lawyer. "How fast can we get a divorce if I have evidence?" He didn't even hesitate. "If you're serious, Robert, we'll have the papers drafted by morning." That was the night I also called Maria. She picked up on the third ring. "Robert, are you okay?" "I need a favor," I said. "Anything," she whispered. "Tell me." Maria had been my friend long before Carla entered the picture. She'd been the only person who didn't look at me with pity after Carla's second betrayal. She just looked at me like a man who deserved peace. That night, I showed up at Maria's apartment with nothing but the keys to a car I no longer wanted and a folder full of betrayal. She opened the door, wearing a hoodie and holding a cup of tea. Without a word, she stepped aside to let me in. I didn't ask her for sympathy. I didn't ask her for warmth. I just needed a place where no one would lie to my face. Maria placed the tea on the table and sat down across from me. "She did it again, didn't she?" I nodded. Maria reached forward and covered my hand with hers. "Then let's make this your last heartbreak." Carla thought I would forgive her like before. She thought I'd break apart, drink myself into silence, and show up weeks later asking for another chance. But this time, I showed up at the city clerk's office, with a pen, and her last name on the line. "Are you sure about this?" the woman at the counter asked. I nodded. "I'm signing away everything I never wanted to carry again." That same afternoon, I changed my legal surname, not just to remove Carla's, but to restore my mother's, the name she gave me before I ever learned how love could rot. When Carla found out, she stormed into my office like she still had a place in my world. "You changed your name?" she snapped. "You're erasing me now?" "No," I said calmly. "You erased yourself. I just did the paperwork." She stood there, mouth open, wearing the same perfume I used to inhale when I missed her. Now it just smelled like memory rot. "You're really throwing away our marriage over a mistake," she shouted. I leaned back in my chair, folded my arms, and asked, "Which one? The first mistake, the second, or the third one where you didn't even lock the hotel door?" Carla's voice cracked. "I thought you'd come around like always. I thought you'd understand." "I do," I said. "I understand exactly what you are now." That night, Maria made pasta. Simple, quiet. The kind of meal where nobody had to apologize between bites. After dinner, we sat on her tiny balcony, feet up on the rail, 2 mugs of black coffee in hand. "You feel free yet?" she asked. I exhaled. "Getting there." Maria looked at me for a long second. "She never deserved you." I stared at the stars, quiet for a moment, then whispered. "She didn't even know me. She only knew the version of me that would forgive her." Maria smiled softly. "Then I'm glad you're gone." I was too. The next morning, I got an email from William. Carla had updated her business site. She removed Mrs. Robert Hayes from the About section and added a line that said, "Independent, empowered, unapologetically me." I smiled. Good. She was finally learning what independence felt like. Now she could stay that way. Because the only thing I was willing to sign now was the rest of my life without her in it. Robert Hayes was the kind of man who didn't raise his voice, not even in betrayal. In his world, pain wasn't expressed through broken glass or slammed doors. It was quiet, measured, final. He had grown up in a house where love was earned, not expected. His father walked out when he was 9. His mother built everything after that from scratch: her name, her career, her son's backbone. By 29, Robert had carved out a corporate empire under his name, but the only thing he'd ever gambled was his heart, and he'd gambled it on Carla. Carla Winthrop. The girl who walked into his firm 7 years ago as a PR assistant with blood-red nails and ambition sharper than her stilettos. She was magnetic. Everyone noticed her, but she noticed him. She knew how to laugh at the right moment, is how to brush his shoulder when walking by, how to praise him in meetings without sounding obvious. It wasn't long before their working dinners turned into real ones. Robert had never believed in office romance. But Carla didn't feel like an employee, she felt like a puzzle piece that had always been missing. Their first kiss happened in the office elevator, late on a Friday night, when the building was empty and the world was quiet. He remembered how she pulled away just long enough to whisper, "I've never felt this safe before." He had smiled and kissed her again, not knowing that someday, that same voice would leave him shattered. Within a year, they were engaged. Robert proposed in Florence, on a rooftop with the city lights beneath them. Carla cried as she said yes. He believed her tears. He believed everything. The wedding was a blur of champagne and whispered promises. Maria, his childhood friend and now his best woman, stood beside him during the ceremony. She smiled through it all, though he never asked how she felt watching Carla slide that ring onto his finger. Maria had known Robert longer than anyone. They met in high school, when he was a transfer student with too many books and not enough friends. She was the artist with ink on her fingers and stories in her eyes. They had an unspoken understanding from the start. He brought her coffee, she reminded him to breathe. But nothing had ever happened between them, not romantically, not then. Maria was the kind of woman who built love slowly, layer by layer. Carla, on the other hand, had ignited him like a matchstick. And for a while, the flame was enough. Their marriage looked perfect from the outside: glossy photos, couples vacations, interviews about how to balance love and work. But behind closed doors, Carla was restless. She complained about the house being too quiet, about Robert working late, about the way his calm made her feel unseen. Robert tried harder. He scaled back work hours, took her on weekend trips, designed an entire reading nook just because she once mentioned wanting one. But Carla wanted fire, and Robert wasn't fired. He was stone, loyal, immovable, and predictable. The first time she cheated, it was with a man she claimed was just a friend. Robert found the messages. She didn't deny it. She cried, told him she felt invisible, said she didn't want to hurt him, she just didn't know how to feel alive anymore. He forgave her. He blamed himself. The second time, she got careless. He caught her coming out of a hotel elevator at 2 a.m., heels in hand, hair undone, eyes wide. The man she was with didn't even notice Robert standing there. She walked past him like a stranger, and for a second, that's exactly what she was. He didn't leave then either. Instead, he booked them into marriage counseling. They lasted another 10 months before he found her again, this time in their own bed. That was when the story really began to change. Maria had always stayed close, but never too close. She watched Robert unravel quietly, never intruding, never offering opinions unless asked. She was the one who dropped groceries at his door when he stopped eating. The one who texted, "Still alive?" every 3 days, just to make sure. Robert had asked her once, "Why do you still bother with me?" Maria replied, "Because I've never met a man who kept giving chances even after being handed ashes." He didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. The truth was, Carla had never liked Maria. She called her the shadow in our marriage. Robert always dismissed it as insecurity, but Maria never said anything in return. Still, when the divorce was in motion, Maria was the one who helped him pack. She didn't ask questions, she just folded his clothes in silence, occasionally glancing at him with those steady eyes that never judged. At some point during the move, Robert looked at her and said, "You know, you were always the only thing she couldn't control." Maria blinked, then smiled. "Good." Carla, meanwhile, panicked. When she found out about the name change, she sent 20 texts in one night. "You're overreacting. This is just revenge, isn't it? You're still mine legally. That name is ours." But Robert didn't belong to her anymore. She had drained every ounce of loyalty out of him. the name was just the final thread being cut. At the city clerk's office, as he signed the new documents, he wrote his mother's last name in firm strokes. It felt like closure. It felt like clarity. When he stepped out of the building, Maria was waiting in her car. She rolled the window down. "So, Mr. Blake now?" He smiled. "Has a better ring to it, doesn't it?" Maria chuckled. "It has your mother's strength in it. She'd be proud." Robert sat beside her. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then, softly, Maria said, "You look like a man who just stopped bleeding." And for once, he felt like one too, because for all Carla had taken from him, his trust, his marriage, his name, she had left him with something far more valuable. Freedom. It began with the scent of someone else's cologne on Carla's skin. Subtle, faint. But Robert was meticulous by nature. He noticed the things others ignored. The way her perfume smelled slightly sweeter when she came home late, the way her hair looked fresher after a supposed long day at the office, the way she suddenly laughed at messages she wouldn't let him see. Robert never accused without certainty. He had grown up watching his mother endure whispered betrayals from his father, accusations without evidence, rage without resolution. He had promised himself that he'd never be that man, so he waited. It took 2 weeks. 2 weeks of playing dumb, of watching Carla walk in and out of their shared life like a guest. 2 weeks of smiling through dinners where she scrolled her phone behind the wine glass. 2 weeks of sleeping beside her without touching her, of memorizing the outline of a woman who was already emotionally gone. Then came William. William was Robert's operations manager, sharp, loyal, and always 2 steps ahead when it came to business. But even he looked uncomfortable when he stepped into Robert's office that Monday morning. "Robert," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "Something wrong with the Singapore deal?" Robert asked, still flipping through the morning reports. William didn't answer right away. Instead, he closed the door. "I didn't want to say anything, but I thought you should know. Your wife's been seen." Robert looked up. Calm, steady. "Seen where?" William hesitated. "The Marriott downtown, multiple times. With the same man." Robert's eyes didn't flinch. "And who's the man?" William's voice dropped even lower. "Investor. One of the minor partners from the Richmond pitch last quarter, Nicholas Lane." Robert exhaled. The name didn't surprise him, but the confirmation did. He had met Nicholas only once, during a holiday party. Charismatic, flashy, too many teeth in his smile, the type of man Carla flirted with even when she was supposed to be working. "Thanks," Robert said simply. William nodded, then added, "There's more." He pulled out his phone and handed it to Robert. On the screen was a photo, grainy, taken from a parking garage. Carla. Red dress, leaning against Nicholas's chest. His hand was on her waist. Her eyes were closed. Robert returned the phone. "I appreciate you telling me." William lingered, almost cautiously. "You okay?" Robert turned back to the reports. "Let's just say, I've been preparing for this chapter." That night, Robert didn't confront her. He didn't rage or explode or demand truth. He waited for her to return home like nothing was broken. She walked in at 11:42 p.m., said she had stayed late to finalize campaign strategies. She kissed him on the cheek. He let her. The next morning, Robert met with his lawyer. They began drawing up the divorce papers quietly, like surgeons preparing for a delicate operation. No leaks, no reactions, no pain allowed on the surface. 3 days later, he set the trap. "Let's have dinner at the new rooftop place," Robert suggested casually. Carla raised an eyebrow. "Tonight? Unless you're busy." She hesitated just a beat too long. No, tonight's fine." He booked the reservation, he booked the suite above the restaurant, and he booked a photographer. While Carla got dressed in a gown she hadn't worn in months, Robert stood by the mirror, adjusting his cufflinks. He watched her, the same woman he once promised forever to, curling her hair for a man she believed was too blind to see the unraveling. They arrived at the rooftop lounge around 7:30, ordered drinks. I took photos for social media, pretended like they were still that glossy couple people envied. By 8:10 p.m., Robert excused himself to the restroom. By 8:20, he was 2 floors up, in the hotel suite across from one Nicholas Lane had reserved under an alias. At 8:33 p.m., Carla sent a message, running a little behind, "Wait for me upstairs." At 8:42 p.m., Robert watched her walk into Nicholas's suite, alone, confidence. The photographer didn't need direction. He clicked each frame like a dagger. Carla locking the door, Carla embracing him. Carla laughed. Carla removed her necklace. Robert didn't watch the rest. He didn't need to. He walked back down to the lounge, paid for both their drinks, and left without saying a word. When Carla came home the next morning, hair tousled and excuses ready, she found an envelope on the kitchen counter. Inside was a photo, black and white, crystal clear, her, smiling in another man's arms. Below the photo was a single sentence. No need to lie, the paperwork will be on your desk by noon. Carla's scream echoed through the apartment, but Robert wasn't there to hear it. He was with Maria. Maria didn't ask what happened, she only opened her front door and let him inside. He collapsed onto the couch, not from shock, but from relief. It was over. Finally. You did the right thing, she whispered. Robert turned to her, eyes blank. Then why does it still feel like failure? Maria didn't respond. She just reached for his hand and held it until the shaking stopped. 2 weeks passed. Carla tried everything. She left voicemails, showed up outside his office, sent messages through mutual friends, even posted a teary video online about being abandoned after giving everything to a man who never loved her right. Maria forwarded the video with a simple caption, "The actress is working overtime." Robert didn't react. He was done playing the part of the forgiving husband. But the final blow came when Carla tried to block the name change. She filed an objection, claiming emotional distress. Robert met her at the courthouse hallway, papers in hand. "You're really going to try to keep my name after everything?" he asked. Carla crossed her arms. "It's my identity too." "No, Carla, your identity was built on deception. Mine is built on what I choose next." He handed her the counter petition. Included in it was an affidavit, with photos, timelines, and full legal grounds for expedited divorce. Carla's hands trembled. "You've turned into someone else." Robert smiled faintly. "No. I've turned back into the man I was before I met you." The judge signed off 3 days later. Name, Robert Blake, marital status, divorced. And on the same day, Maria surprised him with a small celebration, 2 cupcakes, 1 candle. A card that simply said, "To the man who finally chose himself." Robert didn't cry, but something in his chest, something heavy, finally exhaled. Because the real betrayal wasn't Carla sleeping with another man, it was the slow erosion of respect, the hollow apologies, the empty dinners, the way she looked at him like love was a leash, not a home. And now, for the first time in years, he could breathe again. Robert stood in the shower far longer than necessary. The water ran hot, then warm, then cold, and still he didn't move. The sound drowned everything, the ticking of his thoughts, the echo of Carla's laughter in someone else's arms, the way his chest ached in silence. He had signed the divorce papers, he had filed the name change. From the outside, it looked like victory, but no one saw what it cost to sever love when it had once been all-consuming. He dried himself slowly, towel wrapped around his waist, steam clouding the mirror. When he wiped the glass clean, his reflection stared back, gaunt cheeks, sleepless eyes, and the faint hollow under his collarbone that hadn't been there before. Not everything Carla took was material. The worst part wasn't the betrayal, it was how familiar it had become. He remembered their second anniversary, how he came home early, carrying roses and a small velvet box. Inside was a bracelet engraved with the coordinates of their wedding venue. He found her on the balcony, scrolling through her phone, smiling at a name that wasn't his. She didn't even notice him coming in. He'd still given her the bracelet, still took her out to dinner, still kissed her goodnight. Because he didn't want to admit she was already gone. Now, years later, it was official, she was out, but her absence still roared through the halls. Robert picked up a frame. Photo from his desk, him and Carla in Rome, pretending happiness. He didn't smash it, he didn't throw it out, he just turned it face down. Maria called that evening. "Have you eaten?" she asked. "Not hungry." "You said that yesterday." "And the day before," he murmured. There was a pause on the line, then her soft voice. "Robert, you don't have to pretend with me." "I'm not pretending. You're starving, that's a type of grief too." He didn't argue, she was right, Maria always had a way of slicing through his defenses gently. "I'll be there in 30 minutes, she said before hanging up. He didn't stop her. Maria arrived with warm food and no expectations. She reheated pasta in his kitchen like it belonged to her. She handed him a plate, sat across from him, and didn't talk until he took the first bite. He swallowed slowly. The warmth hit his stomach like a surprise. "I hate how empty it feels," he said quietly. "I thought I'd feel powerful walking away from her. But I just feel untethered." Maria nodded. "Because you loved her your whole life." Robert's eyes lowered. "And she loved herself with mine." He looked up, and for the first time, she didn't look like just a friend. She looked like the one person who'd been waiting for him to come home to himself. Still, he wasn't ready, not yet. The days blurred. He went to work, gave clean presentations, nodded through board meetings. But in private, the ghost of Carla lingered. She'd text late at night, sometimes just a period, sometimes just, "please." He never replied, but he read every one. Sometimes, Robert wondered if she really understood what she'd lost, not the lifestyle, not the last name, but the man who would have done anything to protect her, even from herself. One evening, while organizing old files, he found a box at the back of the closet. Inside were letters he had written to her during their first year of marriage. Love letters, hopeful ones, the kind you write when you still believe love is enough to change someone. He read them slowly. Each word felt foreign now, like a stranger's language. He had poured himself into a woman who never learned how to hold water without spilling it everywhere. His phone buzzed. Another message. "Carla. I don't know how to breathe without you." He stared at it for a long time, then put the phone face down. He had already drowned. Now she was gasping, and it was too late. 1 week later, Maria invited him to an art exhibit. He almost declined. He hadn't stood in a room full of people since the divorce went public. But he went. For her. The gallery was dimly lit, walls covered in bold brushstrokes and jagged shadows. Maria walked ahead of him, pointing out pieces she loved. He didn't hear her words, he only watched her eyes, how alive they were around beauty. One canvas in particular stopped him cold. It was a portrait of a man stitched together with broken lines, surrounded by words he'd tried to erase. Underneath, in tiny font, "Healing doesn't mean the scars disappear, it means you stop picking at them." Robert stared at it for what felt like hours. Later, Maria stood beside him, gently brushing her fingers against his sleeve. "That's your piece," she said. "I didn't paint it." "No," she smiled, "but you lived it." That night, as she walked him to his car, Maria paused. "You can fall apart in front of me, you know. I won't leave." Robert looked at her, something unreadable flickering in his gaze. "I know, and that's why I haven't yet, because the moment I do, I want to stay." Maria's expression softened, but she didn't push further. Another week passed, then 2. Carla's final message arrived on a Sunday. "I'm not asking you to come back, I just want to know if any part of you still misses me." Robert typed out 5 different responses, deleted them all, then finally wrote, "No, I only miss the man I was before I met you." He hit send, blocked her. That night, he opened the blinds, cleaned the closet, donated half the clothes that still smelled like a past life. He even replaced the bedsheets, no more silk, just clean cotton, simple, honest, comfortable, just like Maria. At midnight, he opened his laptop, started writing a letter. Not to Carla, not even to Maria, to himself. "Dear Robert, you didn't fail, you trusted me, and that is not a weakness. You lost something, but not yourself. You're still here, still standing, still worthy of the love you give so freely. Let it come back to you now." He saved it, closed the laptop, slept soundly for the first time in months. Because the war was over, and Robert Hayes, now Robert Blake, had finally come home. Robert believed the worst was behind him until the letter arrived. It was an ivory envelope, hand-delivered by a courier, bearing no sender's name. At first, he thought it was another desperate attempt from Carla, but the handwriting wasn't hers, the loops were tighter, the ink darker. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "You think you know the whole truth. You don't. Carla isn't the only one who lied." Robert read the line 3 times, trying to process it. What did it mean? He flipped the paper over. Nothing. But at the bottom corner of the page, there was an address. Downtown. He almost tossed it out, assuming it was some ploy. But something about the handwriting gnawed at him, like a whisper that didn't belong to Carla's games. The following evening, he drove to the address. It led to an old high-rise building, the kind with rusted balconies and dim corridors. The apartment number was 703. He knocked twice. A man in his late 40s answered. His face looked vaguely familiar. Robert had seen him before, but couldn't place where. "You're Robert, aren't you?" the man said, as if expecting him. "Who are you?" The man opened the door wider. "Come in, we need to talk about your wife, and your company." Robert froze. "What?" The man didn't flinch. "Carla didn't just betray you with another man. She betrayed your business, and if you don't listen to me, you'll find out too late." Robert's chest tightened. "Explain." The man walked to a small kitchen table, pulling out a folder. Inside were documents, copies of email threads, contracts, and financial transfers. Robert scanned them, his eyes narrowing. The name Nicholas Lane appeared repeatedly, next to Carla's email address. "She's been feeding Nicholas information about your upcoming acquisition deals," the man said. "Selling insider tips. Your last negotiation with Lennox Corp? He knew every number you were planning before you even walked into the room. That's why they pulled out at the last minute." Robert felt the air leave his lungs. It wasn't just infidelity, it was sabotage. "And who are you exactly?" Robert asked, voice low. "I used to work for Nicholas," the man said bitterly, "until he decided to cheat me out of my cut. I know the game he's running. Carla's not just some fling, she's been funneling your company's strategies for months. She gets her share through shell accounts, and when he's done with her, he'll drop her like the others." Robert's hand tightened around the folder. 1,000 memories replayed, Carla insisting on helping him with presentations, asking for details she never needed to know, sitting beside him on late nights under the guise of support. All the while, she was selling him out. "Why are you telling me this?" Robert asked, suspicion lacing his tone. The man shrugged. "Because Nicholas burned me. I want him to burn too. And if you play this right, you'll take him and Carla down together." Robert drove home in silence. His hands gripped the wheel so tight his knuckles went white. That night, Maria noticed something different in his eyes when he stopped by her place. She handed him tea, but he didn't touch it. "Robert?" she asked. "She wasn't just cheating," he said, his voice rough. "She's been selling my company out from under me." Maria's brows furrowed. "You're sure?" He placed the folder on the table. "I have proof." Maria sat across from him, flipping through the documents. The tension in the room was heavy enough to choke on. "So, what are you going to do?" she asked carefully. Robert leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "I thought signing her name away was the end, but this..." His jaw tightened. "This is war." The next morning, Robert called William. "I need a private meeting, just us, no assistants, no calls," Robert said. When William saw the evidence, his expression darkened. "This is worse than I thought. Nicholas Lane has been circling your deals for months. If this leaks, you could face lawsuits for insider exposure, even if you didn't know." "I know," Robert said coldly, "which is why I'm going to flip the script." "How?" "By letting her dig her own grave. We let her think I'm still blind, then we bait Nicholas into making one final move." 3 days later, Carla called him out of nowhere. "I miss you," she said softly over the phone. "Can we talk? Please, Robert. I know I hurt you, but I still love you." Robert almost laughed. Almost. Instead, he said, "Meet me tomorrow. At the place we used to go for late-night coffee." She sounded surprised, almost hopeful. "You mean, you're willing to see me?" "Tomorrow, 8 p.m. When he hung up, Maria's voice came from behind him. "You're walking into fire." Robert turned. "I know, but this time, I'm holding the match." The cafe was quiet when Carla walked in, dressed in a white coat, hair curled like it was the early days of their marriage. She smiled when she saw him. "You look thinner," she said, sliding into the booth. "You look the same," he replied flatly. Carla tried to reach for his hand. He didn't let her. "I made mistakes," she said softly. "But we had something real, Robert. I know you still feel it." "What I feel," he said slowly, is the weight of everything I gave you, and how easily you sold it." Her face paled. "What? What do you mean?" He slid a single document across the table, a printed email, from her account, to Nicholas Lane. Subject: next week's bid strategy. Carla's lips parted, eyes wide. I don't know what that is." "Don't," Robert cut in, voice like steel. "I have all of it, Carla. Every transfer, every file you leaked. You didn't just betray me, you broke the one thing I built with my own hands, my company." She swallowed hard. "Robert, listen, You have two options," he said, leaning in. "You can confess and walk away quietly, or I'll drag you and Nicholas Lane into a courtroom so fast your lawyer won't have time to fake sympathy." Her breath hitched. "You wouldn't." "I already did," he said coldly. "The authorities have the files." Carla's mask cracked then, her charm shattered like thin glass. "You've changed," she hissed. "No," he replied, "I just stopped bleeding for you." Later that night, Maria found Robert on her balcony, staring at the city lights. "It's done?" she asked. "Not yet," he said, "but soon. I've set the trap, now we wait for them to step into it." Maria placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're stronger than you know, Robert." He turned to her, his eyes softer now. "No, Maria, I'm just done being weak for the wrong person." 2 days later, William called with news. "Nicholas tried to move funds through one of Carla's shell accounts. We intercepted the transaction. He's done." Robert closed his eyes. For the first time in years, there was no ache, just clarity. "Good," he said. "Now we finish this." Because this wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about taking back every piece of himself that Carla had tried to sell and proving that Robert Blake was far from broken. The boardroom was silent. All 12 seats were filled. On one side sat Robert Blake, calm and collected in a charcoal suit, eyes unreadable behind rimless glasses. On the other, Nicholas Lane, flanked by his legal counsel, wearing confidence like cologne. Carla sat 2 seats down from Nicholas, her posture rigid, expression somewhere between guilt and panic. It was 9:00 a.m. sharp. Robert placed a single USB on the polished mahogany table. "Everything's on here," he said, sliding it toward the legal team. "Every unauthorized transaction, insider email, third-party funnel, and falsified consulting expense. The timeline, the evidence, the digital signatures, it's all there." One of the attorneys reached for it, eyes narrowing. "And you're prepared to testify?" "I don't need to testify," Robert replied coolly. "I just need the law to do its job." Nicholas chuckled, but it was nervous. "You think this will stick?" he asked. "You're bluffing, Blake. Half those files were probably doctored. There's no way a judge will—" Robert cut him off, voice like a blade. "You really think I'd come to this table without tightening every bolt first? Nicholas, I ran multi-million-dollar mergers while your biggest achievement was tricking a woman into leaking confidential bids over wine and compliments." Carla flinched. Her gaze shifted downward, fingers clenching the fabric of her skirt. "But here's the part I love most," Robert continued, standing slowly. "You thought you could take everything from me, my wife, my company, my future." He leaned forward, hands flat on the table. "But what you actually did was remove my weakness." Maria stood silently in the back of the room, having come to support Robert, just like she always had. She didn't speak, she didn't need to. Her presence was calm, rooted, unwavering. Robert turned toward the panel of executives and board members. "Ladies and gentlemen, the damage is real, but so is our recovery plan. Effective immediately, I'll be taking full executive control of all merger communications. We'll be launching a forensic audit and pursuing legal action against all third-party breaches." The head of legal nodded. "Understood. I suggest a break while we begin our internal procedures." Nicholas stood abruptly. "You don't get to destroy me, Blake. You think you've won, but—" Robert looked at him one last time. "Nicholas, I didn't win, you lost, because you underestimated the one thing you never understood: loyalty." Security was already waiting at the doors. Carla looked like she might faint. Nicholas was escorted out without another word. The moment the door shut, Carla spoke. "Robert, please." "No," he said, not even turning. "You had your chances, you spent every one of them, now sit in what you created." She stood, voice trembling. "I was manipulated, I didn't know it would go this far." "You knew exactly what you were doing," he replied. "You just didn't think I'd ever stop forgiving you." He turned to leave. Carla followed. "Is this really it?" she whispered. "After everything?" Robert stopped. You don't understand, Carla. I didn't just stop loving you. I stopped recognizing the woman I married, and the day you weaponized my trust, you buried every reason I had to stay. Carla's voice cracked. You said you'd love me forever. He looked her in the eyes. I did, but forever ends the moment betrayal begins. He walked past her, not once looking back. 3 hours later, Robert sat across from Maria at a quiet cafe. Sunlight pooled over their table, soft and warm. She stirred her tea gently. How do you feel? Lighter, he admitted. And more tired than I've ever been. You held it together, she said, even in front of her. Robert nodded. I wasn't sure I could, but seeing her next to Nicholas, all the noise just stopped. It was like watching the end of a movie I already knew the ending to. Maria looked at him with steady eyes. You were in love with a version of her that never existed. I know, he said quietly. I think I always knew. But I wanted the illusion to be real so badly, I kept feeding it even when it was already dead. They sat in silence for a moment, then Maria asked something he wasn't expecting. Do you regret it? He thought carefully. No, because if I hadn't lived through that, I wouldn't have learned what not to tolerate, I wouldn't have learned what love actually looks like. She smiled. And what does it look like to you now? He looked at her for a long moment. It looks like someone who shows up, who stays even when there's nothing to gain. Someone who tells you the truth, even when it hurts. Someone who doesn't make you beg for dignity. Maria blinked, the tiniest shift in her expression. Sounds familiar. It should, he said softly. It sounds like you. The next day, the media broke the story. Nicholas Lane under investigation for corporate espionage. CEO Robert Blake recovers control of Hayes Ventures amid scandal. Carla's name was buried in the footnotes, referenced as a former executive spouse linked to the breach. There were no tears this time, no apologies, no late-night voicemails. It was silent. And for Robert, it was the sweetest sound in the world. Later that week, Robert visited his mother's grave for the first time in 6 months. He stood before the headstone with his new name etched on his jacket pocket. Mom, he said quietly, I finally did it. I chose peace, I chose me. He left a white lily on the marble, then turned and walked away. That evening, Robert returned to the rooftop where he had proposed to Carla years ago. It had been remodeled since. The ivy-covered railing was gone. The candlelit terrace now had LED panels and modern sculptures. Maria stood waiting, dressed in soft navy, hair tied back, a book in her hands. He approached her slowly. You came. I always do, she said. They stood side by side, looking out over the city. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd chosen you back then? Robert asked. Maria didn't answer immediately. She closed the book gently. I used to, but now, I think it happened exactly the way it needed to. You wouldn't have been ready for me then. You needed to lose something false to understand something real. He looked at her. And now? She turned to face him fully. Now, you're here. And you're whole. That's all I ever wanted. Robert reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a small velvet box, not a ring, but something else. He opened it. Inside was a vintage gold key on a chain. For the studio you never built, he said. You said once you needed a quiet place to create. I bought one, downtown. It's yours. Maria stared at him, stunned. You deserve something that's only yours, he continued. No strings, no expectations, just something beautiful, like the way you've treated me. She blinked back tears. Robert. He took her hand. I'm not asking you for anything yet. I just want to keep showing up, like you always have for me. Maria nodded slowly. Then I'll meet you here, as often as you need. They stood there, hands clasped, wind rustling gently around them. And for the first time since everything fell apart, Robert didn't feel like he was rebuilding from ruins. He was building something new, something honest, something lasting, something real. It was raining the day Carla's world officially collapsed. Robert received the news through a discreet phone call from his lawyer. The financial investigation is complete. Carla's name is now formally tied to 3 counts of corporate misconduct and conspiracy. Her accounts have been frozen, her assets are under audit, Nicholas has already turned on her for a plea deal. Robert didn't smile, He didn't gloat, he simply thanked the man and ended the call. Because revenge wasn't about celebration, it was about completion. He opened his laptop and watched a short news clip. Former executive and spouse of Hayes Ventures CEO implicated in insider leaks. Sources report criminal proceedings may follow, pending investigation. There she was, Carla Winthrop, walking out of a courtroom in a rain-drenched beige trench coat, paparazzi hounding her on all sides. Her hair was frizzed, her mascara had run, the carefully curated image she once wore like a crown had crumbled. She kept her head down as the press shouted questions. Carla, did you knowingly sell insider information? Did you and Nicholas Lane coordinate the leaks? Is it true Robert Blake cut all ties and revoked every business-related entitlement you had? She said nothing, because she had nothing left to say. Robert closed the laptop. Silence was justice. That same afternoon, he stood inside the downtown art studio he had bought for Maria. Sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The walls were blank, awaiting life. Maria stood by the window, holding a small mug of paint-stained coffee. "You're early," she said, smiling softly. "I didn't want to miss your first day," he replied. She set the mug down. "You seem different." "I am," Robert admitted. "Because something ended today." Maria tilted her head. "Carla? She's done. Not just legally, socially, financially, professionally." He exhaled. "She spent years tying her identity to mine. Now, the only thing she's tied to is the consequence." Maria didn't gloat either. She simply walked over and wrapped her arms around him, resting her head on his chest. "You didn't let her destroy you," she whispered. "You rebuilt instead." Robert closed his eyes, letting the warmth of her presence settle the last storm in his chest. "I didn't want revenge when this started," he said. "I wanted peace, but sometimes, peace only comes when you finish the fire." 2 weeks passed, then, a letter arrived, this time handwritten, no courier, no lawyers, just Carla. Robert sat at his desk, turning the envelope in his hand. For a moment, he considered burning it, but curiosity won. He opened it and began to read. "Robert, if you're reading this, you probably already know everything. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect a response. I just needed to explain, even if it's too late. I was never supposed to fall apart like this. I thought I could play with fire and never burn. I blamed you for my emptiness, for your calm, for your unwavering loyalty. But the truth is, I was afraid of being ordinary, of being loved without manipulation. You saw the best in me, and I saw it as control. I thought Nicholas would give me power, but all he gave me was permission to destroy myself. And now I've lost everything. I watched your name become the only thing clean in a storm I created. I don't know how to live with that. If I disappear, don't come looking for me. You already did more than anyone ever should have. Carla." Robert set the letter down. He stared at it for a long time, then folded it and locked it away in a drawer he never opened. He never spoke of it again. A month later, the board officially reinstated Robert as the sole chairman of Hayes Ventures. At the meeting, he stood in front of a wall of executives, each one waiting for his remarks. "I've made mistakes," Robert began. "But I've also learned that loyalty, when misplaced, can cost you everything." He let the words settle. "But when earned, it becomes unshakable. And today, I want to thank the people who stood beside me when it was easier to walk away." He nodded toward William in the corner, then locked eyes with Maria, who sat in the back with a quiet smile. "This company was built on integrity," he continued, "and moving forward, we rebuild with nothing less." The room erupted into applause. That evening, Robert and Maria sat on the rooftop where everything began. No suits, no spotlights, just the two of them, sharing coffee and silence. Maria pulled out a small canvas she'd been working on. It showed a man standing on a broken bridge, behind him, smoke, ahead of him, a tree blooming in full color. "I call it crossing back into life," she said softly. Robert traced the edges of the painting. "It's beautiful." "It's yours," she said. He looked at her, eyes full. "So are you." Maria laughed lightly, but there were tears in her eyes. "You know," he continued, "there was a time I thought the only way to be whole was to fix Carla. That if I loved her hard enough, she'd become someone else." "And now?" Maria asked. He reached for her hand. Now I know healing isn't fixing others, it's choosing yourself when no one else will. She leaned against him. You did that, you turned pain into power. And you, he said, you waited. Through the noise, through the silence, through my self-destruction. I didn't wait, she replied, I lived, and when you were ready, I opened the door. He kissed her gently. No fire, no frenzy, just peace, it tasted like closure. Later that year, Robert received a notification on his phone, a news headline. Carla Winthrop declares bankruptcy amid criminal charges. Facing possible jail time. He stared at it for a moment, then deleted it. No comment, no response, no emotion. She had become a chapter, and he had reached the end. On the anniversary of his name change, Robert threw a private dinner. Only 5 people attended: Maria, William, his mother's oldest friend, 2 board members who never left his side. Before dessert, he raised a glass. To survive, he said, to know when to leave, and to never forget what we deserve. They toasted, laughter warm and unforced. Maria whispered later that night, you closed every door that needed to stay shut. And opened the one that mattered, he said, looking at her. One final act remained. He visited the courthouse one more time, not for a name, not for a case, but to file one document: revocation of all marital business entitlements, legacy rights, and estate claims related to Carla Winthrop, effective immediately and permanently. It was the last paper, the last thread, the last echo of her name in his life. When he stepped outside, the sun was setting, golden, soft, warm. Maria waited on the steps. She didn't ask what he filed, she just took his hand. And Robert Blake, rebuilt, unbroken and untethered, walked forward. Carla once believed he'd forgive her forever, but what she never understood was that Robert's forgiveness was not weakness, it was patience. And when it ran out, there was nothing left but truth, and truth had no mercy.